We are live right now.
Hi, everybody.
Yeah, so guess what we're going to talk about today? I mean, I'm talking to the audience, of course. We're going to talk about Final Cut Pro versus Avid versus Premiere. And we'll be right back with you after I do just a minute, like 2 minutes of maintenance, getting this shared out across all the different places. So what's the weather like up there, Michael?
It's Los Angeles. It's gorgeous right now.
Is it?
We're still a little hot, but not too bad.
Okay.
But the weather, looking out the window is pretty nice.
All right, let's share it there.
Next to the woods. I don't miss the humidity at all.
You don't have humidity in California? Come on.
No, come on.
Come on, you have to.
All our humidity sucked up by the earthquakes.
Well, and the fires. Do you have fires this year?
I think they had a few, not near us yet.
Okay, good.
It's just beginning.
Last year, I come out to California, the West Coast, twice a year, once for NAB and once for the Final Cut Pro Creator Summit, which is coming up in 2 months. And last year at the Creative Summit, we had the fires. They warned us to bring masks, breathing masks. So I brought some because I have them for when I mow grass. I don't like breathing in all the dust and stuff that the lawnmower kicks out. But it was smoky during the day. You can actually see the smoke on the horizon and stuff. I didn't really have an issue with it, but I could see where some people might. So they warned people, especially coming from other places, that they should wear masks. So I brought some, but I didn't really use them. But you definitely could see it, though. That was amazing.
Even if they're not near you, your car is covered in ash when you get out in the morning. It's just,
is that right?
Oh, yeah. Just floats across in the air and the wind drops on your cars.
Well, that's true. Now, I get oak pollen because I have like 30 oak trees on my property. I have an acre and a half out here getting ready for leaf season, which is a major, major production.
Yes.
Acre and a half with 30 oak trees, a lot.
You do it yourself?
Well, sometimes, but I try to hire people, and sometimes it works out. Sometimes it doesn't work out. Sometimes they say they're coming and they get, booked up, or it gets rainy and they can't make it because of the rain. One time I was in Chicago teaching Final Cut Pro for Future Media Concepts, and it snowed, and they couldn't. That delayed us for a couple of weeks, So what are you going to do?
Gotta wait.
Exactly, right. Exactly.
If you have this on your page, I can share it too if you'd like.
I have it. Yeah, I have it on my main page, Richard Taylor TV on Facebook.
Hold on.
Go there for a second.
There it is. Well, I've got here. I'm just going to go to the InSync.
I already pasted it there.
Great.
There you go.
And I'm not going to waste time. Just yeah, it's not letting me copy or paste.
Oh, you can't from there. No, it's private. It's a secret group.
Oh, never mind then.
Yeah, you got to go. You got to go to a public group.
All right, I'm going to let you share it. I'll share it when we're done. I'll share the archive. I'm going to quit out all that.
Yeah. So people get that all the time. I watch the different Facebook groups. And they said, "Well, can you make it shareable?" I said, "No, you can't because the group's not public."
Of course.
So you can't share outside the group. So you can do a screen grab. But yeah, it's on my page, Richard Taylor TV, and a bunch of other. It's on some other Final Cut Pro groups as well.
I'll share it when we're done, and you can edit out all my gaffes, and then.
Well, you can't. No, you can't. Not the live stream.
No, of course.
The podcast. The podcast, yes. I edit the podcast. I usually condense them down, take out mistakes and long pauses. And sometimes, like if we're talking about NAB, before NAB, and then NAB happens, well, I would take that section out, because it's no longer relevant.
Fair enough.
Michael, tell me something. What doesn't benefit from editing?
What doesn't benefit from editing? I suppose pure reality, but we could make that better.
We do all the time, don't we?
That's true. Well, it's not reality anymore.
I mean, my girlfriend's an editor. She's not a video editor. She's a, just
Like,
words, just a regular.
Right.
Yeah. And I go to her all the time. I said, read through this and see what you think. And it's just like we take things out. Editing is mostly taking things out, in my experience.
Yes.
So there's very, very few things that don't benefit from editing.
Agreed.
So this live stream obviously can't be edited. Well, I can on YouTube somewhat. But as soon as you edit it on YouTube, what do? They take all the comments out.
And you have to start over with comments, or
you don't get comments if you do it if you edit the video on YouTube.
I didn't know that.
Yes, all your comments are gone. So that's one of the downsides. I don't know why they do that, but that's what they do.
And I got a couple of comments, people mad at me for posting that article, putting the videos on Vimeo. Apparently some people have trouble streaming from it.
Really?
Yeah, and I'm like, I guess I could have done YouTube. I didn't know there was an issue.
I didn't either. Well, you find these things out.
You learn. Works fine for me.
Yeah, it works fine for me too. So I'm going to bring up your article here.
Mm-hmm.
So let me see here. I'm going to play, let me bring up the article itself, and then we'll play a little bit of the video. So
Sure.
this is the headline. And when I saw this, I go, okay, that's, he's not asking for any trouble.
No. I knew I'd get some comments. I knew I'd get response. But, you got to go out there. You got to own your beliefs.
No, you absolutely do.
Yep.
So this is, let me turn that off. This is Michael's article, Why I Switched to Final Cut Pro 10 After 25 Years of Working on Avid. Now, when I saw that, I was curious exactly, because you have the expertise of working on it for 25 years.
And I'm going to admit it now, there's a little white lie in that headline. It was not 25 years, it's a little bit more. But I figured, forever 29, I'd save a couple of years off. But yeah, I learned Avid in 92, I believe it was. So we're in 2019. So it's 27 years. Am I doing the math right?
There you go. Something like that, yeah.
Something like that. So it's a little longer, but I figured 25 was good enough.
Well, yeah, I agree with you. I often just get a round number when I talk about things. So I've used Avid a little bit. I've used it for a year or two, and I've used Premiere a little bit longer. So I have experience with both. I don't have the most current version of either one of those. So your article comes from did you like working with Avid all those years?
Yeah, and during that time, they were not the only players. There was the iMix Cube and Media 100. I mean, there was the video toaster. I worked on that. I started on tape to tape, and I was fortunate enough to cut my teeth on it for the smallest amount of time. And then Avid came around the corner, and I'd heard about it, and it was all rumors, and nobody had seen it. And when I finally saw it, I immediately knew there was a future. And I saw it as soon as I graduated college. And I went and took a class, and I got my foot in the door because the systems were popping up, and nobody knew how to use them. So I didn't know how to edit, but I knew the software. So at least I could drive, and I learned how to edit by doing it that way.
Sure.
So yeah, I loved it. And anything else I used, that paid the bills, I learned how to use Media 100. I've done it on whatever project they wanted me to learn. It's not that hard to learn a new NLE. But Avid always brought me back. I didn't find any reason to switch from them to anywhere else because nobody else had just the range of professional features Avid had. And it worked great. It still works great. It's a workhorse. It's outdated, but it's a workhorse.
Yes, it absolutely is. The few times that I've used it, I used, like I said, for a couple years, it was, I didn't have any real problem with it. This is before 10, though. This was before Final Cut Pro 10 came out. So I was comparing it to 7 and then Premiere rather than comparing it to Final Cut Pro 10. So when I used it, I didn't like the titler. I thought that was clunky as heck.
Oh, the titler is, I think the original titler, they haven't updated it once. It's the original, it's the same tools. They've come out with new titlers, none of which have been any good.
Right.
So Yeah, the titler's bad. There's no question.
Yeah, that's what I thought that was the same. So it's still that way?
The last version I've used, yes. But the shows I work on that are Avid, nobody's on the latest version of the software. You got to let it percolate for a year or so, work out the bugs. So they just came out with a whole new user interface update, and nobody's using it yet on the big shows.
Okay.
They'll get there. There's always bugs when there's a new version. So
Right.
there'll be a version or two behind on a lot of the bigger houses that have a lot of Avids. So I've played around with the new UI. I like what they've done, but I haven't seen the new titler yet. I don't know.
Okay. So there's a couple of, but listen, when I first got the job to edit, it was down at the National Archives, and I went to the interview and I told, there's nothing in my resume that says Avid. Zero. Nothing. It's just all Final Cut Pro. I'm a Final Cut Pro certified trainer. I've been using it since version 1. I started training since version 5. So everything was Final Cut Pro, but the guy that hired me says, well, we have an Avid. I said, that's not a problem. I'm an editor. I can learn how to use it. I mean, if you brought me down here for the job, obviously you think that I can, that I can do it. So, and then he said it's on a PC, which I said, whatever. I can get through it. I can get through it. So I did learn it. Mm-hmm. I listened. I went through every PDF I can find about Avid. Final Cut Pro to Avid, but mostly just Avid stuff. And I printed it all out and had this giant binder. And I would go through, okay, I need to do this. Let me see, how do I do that in Avid? Okay, there you go. And that's how I learned. I learned, on the job, and it was fine. And then the PC started crapping out. So then I snuck a Mac up there with Final Cut Pro 7. 6 or 7, I'm not sure which it was. And then during that course of thing, Final Cut Pro 10 came out. And I got like, wow, this is interesting. At that point, I had most of my projects on 7.
Right.
But I would use 10 for anything I could.
Really? So you actually gave it a shot from day one?
Well, there's a couple of reasons. Number one is I wanted to learn it. Number two is everybody was starting from ground zero with 10.
Yes. So
I don't care how much training you had in 7 or Avid or Premiere. Everybody on the planet was starting from ground zero.
Right.
I said, well, I'm just going to jump in this race right now. So when it is viable, I'm going to be that far further ahead. So that's what I did. Now, I just did small things. I didn't do big things because my big projects were all on 7. And then, listen, when they had that premiere, remember at the Super Meet in April?
Right.
And they showed the Final Cut Pro 7 timeline, and then they showed it being translated to Final Cut Pro 10. Uh-huh. And I wrote an article. I wrote the very first article on kenstone.net based on Final Cut Pro 10, the very first one. And one of the things, there's two things that I questioned. I questioned their use of the word for audio sample level. It was not sample level. It was sub whatever. It's not the same as subframe level. It's not the same. So I questioned that. And then the other thing I questioned was how did they get the Final Cut Pro 7 sequence into Final Cut Pro 10?
Right.
Which, of course, they
do that.
You can't do that. So, but they gave the impression that you could by showing that. They gave the impression that you could. Now, they may have had some behind-the-scenes tool that they used to help them, but they also could have done a lot of it manually. I don't know. But, I mean, I kind of knew some things now, but I didn't know then. And I questioned that right from the beginning.
Right. And I think if you'd been able to take projects from 7 and move them into 10, we'd be in a whole different story.
Right.
But Apple is known for, if there's no way to do it well, we're willing to cut ties and start over. Love it or hate it, they've done it a million times.
Yes, they have. The earphone port on the iPhone. Mm-hmm. That even though you can get it with Lightning connector, people complained about that. They complained about the MagSafe connector disappearing off the Mac Pro.
Yeah, they complained about getting rid of floppy disks. I remember that.
Oh yeah, I remember that. Sure, when the iMac came out, absolutely. Absolutely, I remember it specifically.
Apple is always, you don't know it yet, but this technology's dead. We're moving forward. And ready to catch up.
And so they did it with Final Cut Pro 10. So your article, is there a chat with the article anywhere? where people can comment or comment section?
Yeah, on the actual No Film School website where they host it, the
Yes.
very bottom there's comments underneath. Yes.
Is there a couple of comments?
Yeah, absolutely. There's comments down there, and people who posted it on Facebook in different groups, or if I posted it, there are a lot of comments on there. I think more than on the No Film School page itself. So a lot of comments.
And they're all agreeing with you, right?
100%.
100%.
To get a single troll. No one disagreed. No, there was a range. There was a big range, and there were people who loved it, and there's people who actually watched and gave it a try and disagreed, and okay. And then there's people who were saying things that, oh, you clearly didn't try this or that or the other. I'm like, no, I show you this in the article. I show you in the video. You just didn't bother reading it. You're commenting on something where you read the headline. And I mean, we've all done it. I'm guilty of it.
Sure.
So not everyone's going to read the article. Not everyone's going to sit through a 35-minute video. But I was hoping to reach a few people who were willing to give it a shot. People who know me. You may not think I'm a great editor, but I have the experience. So whether you like my work or not, I've been doing it a long time, and maybe I know maybe I learned something that this system can actually do that Avid can't and Premiere can't. So I wrote it for them.
Right.
And I hope I reach some.
So one of the things that I always talk about when we talk about the NLE debate,
right?
Well, there's a couple things. Number one is I don't care to discuss it with anybody who comes up with my NLE can beat up your NLE.
Agreed. None of them are perfect. They all have a lot of room for improvement.
Right. So on a professional level, I'm sure happy to discuss the different NLEs. So Final Cut, of course, it's notorious, or it's famous, I should say, notorious if you're on the other side, for the magnetic timeline, which people have a problem. Some people have a problem with. I don't know how you can go back once you use the magnetic timeline. That's one of the problems. The live skimmer is the other one. Two big things that I just, I go to Logic a lot. Has tracks. It's fine for audio. When I get into 10, 20, 30 tracks, I need tracks for audio. I don't want my bass drum jumping around all over the place, different places.
Right.
I want the bass drum all the way across one single track because I do cut it up sometimes. Same with the snare, same with other things. So I like tracks for audio, always have. But I don't have the live skimmer in Logic. Come on, don't you guys? Yeah.
Can't comment on that.
Don't they talk to each other? I know they do. Final Cut Pro Team, I always tease them when I see them. I say, can't you borrow, Logic gave you those plugins the last time. Yeah. Give them the skimmer, the live skimmer, please. Yeah. So I have that. Because one of the things you talk about on the Final Cut Pro, one of the first things you talk about is double clicking in Avid and Premiere versus Final Cut.
And you don't think about it. When you're it's just the way it works. It's nonstop double clicking. And I've been in a room with a producer who wants to see footage, and you're just loading up each click and moving through it. And the thumbnails, even the thumbnails on Avid, you can change the keyframe.
Right.
But what a hassle. You got to hit the slide button. You got to hit over and over. I think there's a way to find the frame and hit set keyframe. But it is the slowest molasses process you could do. And double clicking every shot. No, was it in that clip? Was it in that one? So you see editors opening up the bin and doing it in keyframe mode. And I've seen them have grids, and the ones that they like, they'll literally grab and move up a little bit in the grid. So that's how they can find their favorites, because there's no way to mark favorites. So you're making sub clips and moving them higher or lower in the grid. And there's a lot of workarounds, and everyone has their way of doing it. And it works fine, but it's slow. And when you've gone to the fast version, and I've had to go back. I just did an Avid project 2 months ago, a Netflix show with 6 editors. We had to do it on Avid.
Right.
And I can use it. I've been driving that thing a long time. I'm fast, but as fast as I am on that and as new as I am to Final Cut, I'm faster on Final Cut because it's more efficient. So double click nonstop all day.
That's the live skimmer, and it works no matter where you are in the browser. It works in the timeline if you turn it on. So I agree. I mean, like I said, in Logic, which I go back and forth, I don't have that option. I got to click. And I got to click.
Get them to add it.
Well, I'm going to see him in a couple of months, the Final Cut Pro team over at the Summit again. I'm not sure where we're going to see him. We're going inside the Apple Space campus this time.
Right, I heard.
Last year, we just went to the Apple Spaceship Campus Visitor Center. But this year, we're going inside. Now, I'm going to make a stop on Tim Cook's office and say, do you know what Final Cut Pro is? Can you give us some extra resources there if they need it? I'd appreciate it.
I would love to see this just really. My goal, the reason I did the article, the reason I've been trying to get people into this is I want to be able to use it more often. It's a selfish reason. When I go to a job, I don't want to have to convince them anymore. I don't want to have to fight with the producer or the director. They shouldn't care what I'm using.
Right. And
I want to make it easier. Now I can say, look, there's this article some guy wrote. They don't even know it's me. It works. And I've been talking to professional editors all over, and how do you explain the magnetic timeline? Or when you tell them there's no tracks, I have this thing, you just glass over it. It makes no sense.
Right.
So without showing them what it can do and the advantages, no one's going to switch to it. So I did this for me because I want to use it more, and I want to see Apple realize what they have. And they're never going to make money on Final Cut, but they'll make money selling the boxes. That's what they do. They make their profit on selling the machines. Great, get these machines in everywhere, running the best edit software you've got. And, add sharing, add the final features it needs to really be competitive in that space.
Would you consider $1 billion a good chunk of change?
For me, absolutely. For Apple, surrounding error, but it's nice.
Well, Final Cut Pro has probably exceeded 1 billion
sales.
Well, because it sold 18 months ago, they said 2.5 million. So that's $750 million right there.
Right.
And 18 months ago, we're probably up to 3 to 4 million seats at $300 a pop for the most part. I mean, obviously they have education, which is cheaper. So I think they're probably over $1 billion. So that's a nice chunk of change. That could be, if Final Cut makes it, they should give the resources back to the Final Cut Pro team, whatever they need. Now, my friend Philip Hodges says there's a point when there's an optimal amount of programmers and developers. You can't just keep adding them and expect the results to keep on compounding higher and higher. There's an optimal amount, so maybe they've reached that. I don't know.
And that's the kind of thing where I don't think I'll have any way of finding that out. But I'd love to see them just put the right number of resources in,
right?
See it really grow and compete on a high-end level.
So let's talk about that. So one of the criticisms of Apple and Final Cut is it doesn't promote Final Cut perhaps like Avid does, or perhaps like Premiere does.
Right.
So tell me about that. Do they promote? I know I've seen recently where there was a Premiere event in Europe, I think, and they invited all these editors over and stuff.
Tons of events out here. I mean, Premiere does a lot of promotion, and Adobe does promote. They have to. Adobe lives or dies on selling the software.
Okay.
You can't sell Photoshop every year anymore because what's Photoshop not able to do now that they'll be able to do in 5 years? I don't know. I mean,
I don't know either.
An amazing program. So all these guys, Adobe, Microsoft, they've switched to licensing, and they have to give you a reason to keep licensing it because they don't have hardware to fall back on or another product line. I mean, Microsoft does, of course.
Sure.
But if Adobe or Avid don't promote their products and don't keep people using them, they're done. So they have to stay in that game. Apple, this is not their livelihood. They sell the hardware and they sell software that works on it. But I mean, if Apple lost $1 billion in sales because Final Cut went away, they wouldn't notice it. It's nice money and it's an amazing product. But to a company Apple's size, it's not their lifeblood. So I heard that the Apple Watch makes them the largest watch retailer in the world. They're clearly putting money and effort into it, but it's not a big change on their bottom line. It doesn't move their stock price.
That's absolutely correct. So why do you think they bother then?
Because I think they want to have a great ecosystem, and I think they want to sell their computers. But Avid and Premiere also run on Macs.
Right.
So they're selling those boxes no matter who's making the NLE there. You can buy a PC version, but a lot of Avids and Premiere systems are on Macs.
Absolutely.
Yeah, they're selling either way, but I don't know their reasoning for having the Pro line of apps, but I'm so happy they have it.
Oh, I am too.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, I can't tell you the why, but I'm just happy with the result.
So when editors, my observation with editors is they get very emotional about NLE software.
Oftentimes, yes. Not everyone, but a lot. And I've done it too, yes.
Yeah, I don't think I get emotional about the software. I may get aggravated about something, but I don't think emotional. They act like it's, I understand, yes, I completely understand when the switchover happened, studios were based on hardware and stuff, and then also it didn't work. I completely understand that. But that would be getting angry about it. I don't know if I get that emotional on an emotional level. Just anger, yeah, perhaps.
I mean, when you use a different NLE, it's a matter of learning the new workflow, and your muscle memory is not going to be the same as it is on your favorite system. So I don't like using Premiere. I've cut a movie on it, I've cut TV shows on it, I've cut smaller projects on it, some commercials or small things, and I can get it to work. And in the end, I mean, the final product, there's nobody watching the final product who can tell you what it was cut on. They all get the same place. They're all cars driving from point A to point B, and you're going to get there, and one might be a little quicker, but the people there don't know how you got there, and they don't care. So it really only matters is the workflow, how it is for you as, I got to get my cat off the counter. Bandit, get down. And he's doing it. He knows.
Well, you know what you use for that? I'll tell you what you do. They have motion sensor air cans. So when
Can
a cat,
you send me a couple?
when a cat, go get them on Amazon. When a cat jumps on the counter, motion sensor sends a blast of air out that sounds like a cat hiss, and they jump down.
He's under my feet. I'm gonna have him say hi. Come here, Bandit. Come here. Yeah. This is a little troublemaker. Hey, buddy.
Oh, very cute.
Yes, you're on TV now.
Now, what kind of a cat is that?
Siamese.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, he's one of the Siamese. We got 3 of them around here somewhere.
Yeah, we have a few.
We were talking about getting emotional about your system. I don't get in fight. If there's a Premiere job and I really need work and I think the job's interesting,
Sure.
I take it. But I have to think to myself, is it worth the hassle of working on a system that I don't know as well? And I have specific issues with Premiere that I'm not going to get into. Some of their workflow I think is really poorly implemented, and I have to deal with that. And is it worth the headache for me? So that's as emotional as I get about it these days. If I don't want it, somebody else can take the job. I have nothing against Adobe. I think they make some great products. I just don't like the workflow in Premiere. I think it's difficult and convoluted. I also didn't like Final Cut 1 through 7. I was not a fan.
Oh, really? Really?
I knew how to use them.
Sure.
I cut a lot of things on them. And I think that's why I don't like Premiere. They're so similar. I was not a fan. I preferred Avid over the first 7 Final Cuts. So I would turn down those jobs unless it's a really cool job. Yeah, I'll suck it up for a bit.
Sure.
And part of it is how well I know Avid. So for something to take me away from the industry standard, that it really, Rose Premiere's made, they're the king.
Yes.
So I know it really well. To take me away from that job, it has to be a job I'm really interested in for a certain amount of time. I don't want to do it for 2 years, but for 3 months, okay, I'll take that. And Final Cut 10 is the first one to actually make that switch in almost 3 decades.
Yeah, if I was starting out, I would also learn everything. I'd learn Avid and probably Resolve at this point is as good as they're becoming. I don't know if I keep seeing reports about crashing and stuff. That's not fun.
No,
that's for sure.
If Final Cut weren't around, if Final Cut 10 weren't here, if it was really Avid and Premiere, I would really be looking at Resolve. I like a lot of what they're doing. But because Final Cut 10's here, they're a track-based system. And I don't want another track-based. Once you've gone trackless, going back to Avid is frustrating now.
Right.
Having to deal with 20, 30 tracks. I can do it. We've all done it. I don't want to anymore. I don't have to.
Right.
And that's the one place of Resolve. Imagine if Apple bought Resolver and they merged. Imagine how amazing that would be. And I don't know
Well,
if, or Blackmagic want to hear that. I don't know. But they both have such strong features, and if you could combine them into a perfect system, that'd be awesome.
yeah, but it would. It would. I mean, listen, everybody, I'm sure you agree, all three major NLEs, Premiere, Avid, and Final Cut Pro, they all have the strengths.
Absolutely.
And their weaknesses. Well, weaknesses, crashing, I don't think is a weakness. That's just bad programming or not taking care of whatever.
Or adding features too quickly and not giving you time to fix everything.
Right.
If you go too fast, you're going to have issues.
Right, exactly. So let's go through some of so the first thing that I noticed in your video, I got about halfway through it, is you talked about double clicking. That makes complete sense for anybody that's sorting through material. Now, I don't think the other NLEs have the live film strip view like Final Cut does. They have like an icon or something. Is that what happens?
Yeah, Avid does not. I've heard Premiere you can do skimming within a clip, like within a thumbnail move around. I don't see that as comparable, but
well, can you see the different frames if you zoom in? I mean, can you see frames like you can in Final Cut?
I think you can only see one at a time.
Yeah,
it's been about a year since I've used Premiere, so I'm not as familiar with it. But to my knowledge, you cannot.
And what about Avid?
Avid, no way. Avid is the thumbnail or just the list view. No film strip view there.
Speaking of that, I wish we had a combo view in Final Cut Pro 10 the way we had in 7. We had the list view and the film strip view combination both. Yeah.
I would love to be able to set events. Some events I always want in film strip, some I always want in list. And I wish I could say, hey, this, whatever I left that event in.
Yes.
Yeah. That should be built in.
Yeah, well, people are complaining that if something crashes, they quit and they come back and it's a different layout, different project intent.
Yep.
That's kind of weird. I don't want that to happen. It happens it does happen, but I don't like that.
I remember Avid, the early days, it crashed so often. And this was brand new tech. And the instant it crashed, you put your speakerphone on and called Avid tech support because it would take 3 hours to get through, literally. So
is that right?
Oh, I'm not joking. And you'd have 3 hours to troubleshoot and try to figure it out. And if you did, you'd hang up the phone and get out of the queue. And if not, by the time you'd exhausted all your knowledge, they'd pick up the phone. But all the things we wanted then, little by little, over years, they started being added. And you're seeing that with Final Cut. New software, they cannot release it finished. They're going to add new features. I mean, I don't know how dupe detection is in it. I'm really praying that somebody's listening and we get into the next version. Dupe detection and sharing, I can wait for the rest. But we need those. But you're going to see these things added in. Maybe they'll have a better event view. Maybe they'll have more options in there. They'll all get there in time, but they're only going to add so many each year. And if you do too many too quickly, you start getting crashes. Yes. Premiere was doing that. They were updating so often. And jumping way ahead here, but the sharing on Premiere, the film I cut on it, that sharing caused damage that took us weeks to fix. Weeks of editors who knew what they were doing and an assistant editor who really knew what he was doing. And the sharing was so poorly implemented, it caused a lot of damage to the media. So,
you're saying sharing, you mean just regular exporting?
No, sharing as in being able to share a project.
Oh, okay.
In the traditional term, not the Final Cut project sequence term. So sharing your actual film project with multiple editors at once. That's
gotcha. Gotcha.
Yeah, multiple editors on a library on a project is one of the big lacking features in Final Cut.
So far,
yeah. And I remember when it was a lacking feature in Avid. I remember when you were putting stuff on drives and handing the drive over. And you're doing that on Premiere until not too long ago. So these things take time to implement and to implement well. And we don't know what Apple's working on. I really hope they're working on that.
Well, speaking of that, so Apple has pre-announced, which I like the new Apple that pre-announces things. Mm-hmm. Apple has pre-announced an update to Final Cut Pro 10 for the fall. They announced it at WWDC.
Right.
And people are assuming, probably rightfully so, that it has to do with the Mac Pro coming out at the same time in the fall. Right.
Yes.
But Final Cut Pro 10.4 came out at this point 22 months ago.
So it's time for 10.5, we hope.
Well, this is what I'm saying. So based on current Final Cut Pro 10 full number updates, we're way, way overdue. The longest one has been 18 months. There was one that was 16 months, and there was one that was 14 months. So 10.3 to 10.2 to 10.3, 10.3 to 10.4 is what I'm talking about. And now 10.4 to 10.5. It's 22 months at this point. During the Creative Summit, it'll be actually 2 full years between full number updates.
Right. So
which is a long, yes. So I'm hoping it's 10.5. Other people have said, no, it's going to be 10.4.7 or whatever. And it's just like, well, then that means we're going to go into 26 plus months, maybe, longer for 2020. I mean, the thing is last two summits ago, they showed us 10.4, but it didn't come out until December.
But as long as you show it and let people know it's coming.
Exactly.
That's all you need to do. If it's not ready yet, just let us know it's around the corner so we can prepare for it.
Exactly. Because here's the thing about the summit. The last 3 summits has always been a Final Cut Pro update within a day or two, or the same day. A major feature update. The last 3. It was right. 3 years ago was 10.3. 2 years ago was 10.4. Last year was 10.4.4 with all the additions they had there, the features. So if they don't have something around the summit, it's going to be like kind of disappointing.
You can't set up that path. You got to have a new iPhone every September.
Yes.
And just be some kind of update for Final Cut every fall. Yeah.
Absolutely. I agree with that.
I can't wait to see what they're giving us.
Yeah. Well, that's what exactly. I mean, the summit's coming up, so I'll be going to that. Have you ever made it to one of those, or have you?
I have not made it. I'm hoping this year will be my first.
Oh, that'd be excellent. I'd be glad to meet you in person. That'd be fantastic.
Absolutely. It's my goal. I'm trying to make it this year. So still working out details.
So
freelancer.
Yeah, well, that's true. That's absolutely true. So they have we get to go to the spaceship campus this year. I'm not clear.
That's a strong motivator to get me up there.
Yeah, I'm not sure what we're going to see inside the spaceship campus. I mean, can we just walk around? I'm sure we're going to be escorted.
For sure.
And I'm sure we can't get to.
Yeah.
So maybe we get to go to Steve Jobs Theater and see the presentation. I don't know, because they do a presentation, and they also have announced that Apple Final Cut Pro team is coming back to the Juniper to give us a private session like they did last year. That was really, really cool. So the Final Cut Pro team comes into a closed session room. Mm-hmm. You can ask questions in advance. You can submit questions in advance. And not only will they answer your questions, they will ask us questions.
How many people, is that the whole conference gets to go in?
Yes, 150 plus people.
That's amazing, yeah.
Now, here's the thing that they say each time. They say, here's the rules. No photography, no audio recording, no video recording. Mm-hmm. And if you don't like those rules, there's a Starbucks across the street.
Fair enough.
And they said,
talk about what they say there?
No.
So non-disclosures, okay.
They didn't make us sign one, but in order for them to feel comfortable and talk openly, mm-hmm. they want to think that these things are not going to leave the room. So besides just some like generic descriptions of things, like I said that dupe detection was brought up. I told Sean Lander that because he's the one from Australia. That was brought up. I don't think that's a big secret, but I'm not going to say in what the context was or anything, but it was brought up.
I met one of their developers, one of the Final Cut developers at NAB this year. I was there for one evening, and I brought it up, and some people around him burst out laughing. I go, I know, but I have to. This is the first time I met you. I have to mention it.
Sure.
I was so convinced it was going to be in the last release. Yeah. It's such an obvious hole. I'm like, it's going to be here, right?
Yeah. And, well, I've got a list of things that I want to see. Now, one of the interesting things I point out to people is we waited 5 years for remove attributes.
See, I wasn't on that long ago. I didn't know that part. 5
years to remove attributes.
And you just had to do it manually for each one before.
You couldn't remove. There was no remove attributes feature until at year 5 it came out. So patience. Patience.
Yeah.
I mean, it's frustrating sometimes, of course. I mean, I want to see more colors in Final Cut. In Logic, I can circle a group of clips and I can color code them, and I can circle a group of clips and color code them. I can see instantly my sections on the timeline by clips. I can also rename individual clips in the timeline, and it doesn't ripple back to it doesn't rename all the whole master file, just the individual clips. So I can say, okay, because I use the audio in Logic, and I can do, this is one section. Suppose I'm interviewing Sam Messman. I say, this is my Sam Messman section, and he's talking about whatever. I circle the clips and make them one color, and then if I'm talking to somebody else, I do a section over there and circle them, and I can instantly see my timeline, instantly all the clips that are associated with it. So I like to see more colors.
The Avid timeline didn't come for years. They
really?
They didn't have that when it first launched.
Okay.
Great. So years after, every year, new features. Again, new software, brand new. It takes them a while to add what we now think is basics, what we now think should be in there. So it's going to take some time. But yes, we need colors in the timeline. And we need, I played around with it where if you change the audio roles, if you assign different roles with different colors, and they're actually attached, if they're synced with video, I don't think the colors show up in the timeline. And so doing interviews with video, like something in reality TV we do a lot, the interviews would be yellow. So if you're looking at timeline, all the yellow spots are on-camera interviews, or if it's just the audio, it's still an interview underneath B-roll. If you do that with synced video in Final Cut, if I remember correctly, the yellow doesn't come in. So you can assign a yellow color for the audio roll, but when it's synced, you don't see it. The instant you break the sync and the audio roll drops down, you see it there.
I see.
But then some things like that are very helpful in the timeline.
So what kind of comments on your article that were maybe not agreeing with you that you thought were helpful or you thought were accurate? Were there any?
Yeah, I mean, there's some people with workflows. There are some. And some things I didn't quite. Someone wrote that they just watched the first section I did on finding footage, and then they could do it with Premiere, and they went into this convoluted, long response
that
they could get. And I'm like, there's no way that's as fast.
Right.
Maybe I misunderstood what they wrote, but there's no way organizing and finding footage in Premiere that way and being able to look through it, you're still double-clicking, is going to be as quick. Other people have workflows involved using Audition in Premiere for audio. I think they call it Audition, their audio editing software. I could be wrong on that. Or using After Effects. And I get it. If you're using After Effects a lot and bringing that in, it could make sense to be on Premiere. I'm not an After Effects guy. I don't use motion either.
Right.
I want to do effects. And when I need to do effects, if I can't do it in the edit system, someone else can do it and send me the composite or send me the alpha channel version, and I'll drop it in. But I find that the places that want you to do everything, if you have to be a jack of all trades, they're not going to be as high end, and they're going to pay less. They're going to be more entry-level gigs. Not always. There's exceptions.
Sure.
I have friends who work for professional sports teams, and they have to be able to produce, write, shoot, get the audio, edit, everything complete. I mean, that's high-end pro. But in the stuff that I'm doing, in the world in TV and film, you're very much in your channel. You do editing, and you're not the sound guy. You're not the graphics guy.
Okay.
So there's places where having After Effects integration is really important, but not for me. So there's absolutely aspects where you could use it, but I'm not going to have the same concerns as other editors at other places.
So one of the things you say in your article, after 25 years as an Avid editor, I've switched to Final Cut Pro 10 and I'm not alone. Do you guys have a secret cabal that you guys have meetings and you don't tell everybody that you're liking Final Cut Pro 10?
Actually. There's a secret Facebook group, but I can't reveal the information.
That's fine.
Yeah. There's a couple of them. There's one just for local LA guys, and we just get together and meet and have dinner every now and then and talk and share tips. And there's also plenty of public ones on Facebook.
Sure.
Reddit has a Final Cut Pro page that I notice is fairly empty and unused, and people post questions and they don't get answered. And I can't always answer them, but I always post in there if I see that. Check out Facebook, do a search. There's a ton of
right. There's a ton of Final Cut Pro groups.
A lot. And very helpful there.
Yeah. One of them has 33,000 members at this point. That's the ones that my Aussie friends, Sean Lander and Matt Goddard, are moderators for. They talk about how much time that takes moderating things every
Well, I met
day.
them both. I was in Melbourne last year for a film I'm working on, so I
Oh,
got to
is
meet
that right?
Years and lunch. Yeah, it was great.
So
Met a bunch
what
of guys out there.
I often hear about the film ability of Avid versus in Final Cut's lacking to do films in Hollywood. I mean,
Yeah.
some of that seems like it's hardware, right? It's the systems that Avid has, the
I don't
hardware.
think it's hardware. I think it's the sharing. It is. So the films I'm cutting, and you haven't heard of them because they're not out yet. The one should be. We just sent it out for sales. One I'm still cutting, but the ones I'm doing on Final Cut are small films. It's just me. I have an assistant editor maybe,
Okay.
but I'm the editor. If there was a second editor, we could share the project back and forth and make it work. But on these tent poles, you've got easily 4 or 5 editors at once.
Okay.
Full-on editors. You've got 4 or 5 assistant editors. You've got sound editors and music editors on top. You've got the visual effects editors. You can have 20 people sharing these projects. Same with reality TV. I've been in buildings where they have a Unity system, which is Avid's, they're jellyfish, sharing information with multiple computers. They'll have 50, 60 edit bays, maybe 100 edit bays running on a couple of I think probably the same basic server system.
Right.
Cables running throughout the walls. And you need to have that because I'll be in one room. You'll have 5 editors in 5 different rooms all around the building, and we can share projects, open each other's bins, send information back and forth. That is a must-have for a larger film.
But that's one of the things I heard. As a matter of fact, I think when I interviewed your wife a few years ago.
Yes, you did.
On Final Cut Pro Radio, is you have to actually physically ask the person to unlock a bin?
Not quite.
Not quite? How does that work?
In Avid, if I open my cut bin, if the cut bin and I'm working in it,
Yeah.
I'll have a green icon in the corner. That means I have the lock.
Okay.
Somebody else can open that bin without asking me. They'll
Right.
have a red icon. They can take it and put it in their bin and make a copy, but they can't affect my bin. So I'm the only one who can save to it,
Right.
but they open and take stuff out. They can't put stuff in. So if they want to hand something to me, they'll put it in they'll make a new bin, pass the mic, and I would open that and take it out of there.
Well, that's what I'm saying. But in order for you to release that bin,
I'd have to close it.
yeah. But how do they tell you? How do they request that? They can't do it through the Avid infrastructure. They have to call you, text you, walk
Yes.
over and say, "Can you?" That's what I'm talking about.
Yes.
Why isn't there something built into Avid, a messaging system that says, "Hey, Michael, can you close that bin so I can do something because it hasn't been used for like the last hour?"
Because that'd be nice, but honestly, we use text message, iMessage. We're
Well,
all on iPhones. I'll just message the other editor. We'll share it.
Doesn't that seem a little 1990s, like SneakerNet?
Sure, absolutely.
I mean, you would think they can build it in. I mean, to me, it seems like they just built it into the app. Both of you are on Avid. There's a little message system in Avid that says, "Michael, you haven't been editing for a half hour. Would you mind unlocking that bin so I can go do some editing and then I'll unlock it?" Rather than instant message and text
That's
message.
great. If before Avid adds that, I have a list of other things I'd rather focus on first.
Like what? Give me one. No, not Final Cut related, just Avid related.
No, Avid. It's been a while since I played on that. Other than going trackless, other than major changes, I would love some updates for the bins, for the bin view. And again, some of this is being put in the new user interface.
Okay.
So I want to say they may have done some of this. I just haven't more than 5 seconds yet.
Sure.
So I don't know what they've changed in there. But
Okay.
playing Avid, there's always stuff you come up. Oh, I wish I could do this. I wish I could do that. The titler being a good one. They just update quickly because they don't want to break muscle memory. When they do update, there's a large group of actors who complain.
Well, but that's understandable. Not changing so dramatically that their shortcuts don't work or their muscle memory doesn't work, whatever. That's one of the things that when Logic went from version 9 to version 10, they learned from the launch of Final Cut. They were after the launch of Final Cut 10, and they didn't have that dramatic a transition from 9 to 10. It was more a natural progression.
Which is smart.
Yes.
Or
yes.
if you're going to do the big transition, don't kill off the old one.
The same day.
porting the old one for the next 5 years. You have plenty of time to transition over and make the switch and give third-party people a chance to make an automatic duck kind of program
Sure.
that will maybe do the transition for you. Yeah,
Sure.
if you give people that overlap time, I think you're okay.
No, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Everybody knows in hindsight, I think that's what they should have done. As a matter of fact, the guy that invented Final Cut Pro 10, he said that he was in Apple at the time, he wanted to give away a free version of Final Cut Pro 7 with every version of Final Cut Pro 10.
That would have been great.
Yeah, that would have been great. Or what I've often said is, why not give us an update to Final Cut Pro 7 the same day you release Final Cut Pro 10? Just to, I think it was 7.0.3 when it was killed. So give us 7.0.4 and then say, hey, in 6 months this is going to be gone. We want you to use this new version.
Right.
But whatever.
Watching Bradley Olson's documentary, and I can't remember who said it. It's a great line, and I apologize if I won't attribute it properly. That it was the transition from 7 to 10 was a hard cut and should have been a dissolve.
Steve Martin.
There you go.
So cross dissolve. Yeah, I was a co-editor on that doc.
Oh, perfect. Then
So
you know.
I remember this very specifically. One of the earlier cuts, he had that in there, but he didn't have Steve doing the hands that he did for the cross dissolve. And I said, let's put that visual back in. I think it's very powerful. So absolutely. And my comment was very similar. I said, when 10 came out, Apple brought us to a cliff. Either you stay on this side of the cliff or you jump over. It's the same kind of thing. But that was Steve Martin. Yep.
Yeah, putting some stairs down or a little bridge.
Something.
It would have been a whole different story.
Yeah. But I think people still would have been mad. Apple's a big target. People get mad. They get mad at them. But I mean, back from the days of Steve Jobs, I know Steve Jobs was very aggravated when Avid dropped Mac support and Premiere dropped Mac support around the same time that Final Cut Pro 10 came out.
Final Cut Pro 1, wasn't it?
I'm sorry, 1. So 1.0, right.
But in their defense, and I was one of the people really angry about it, in Avid's defense when they did it, they were saying Apple changes their hardware configuration every 2 years. We don't know what they're doing. We got to spend $1 million to design a new, they call it a pizza box. So it's a box gear that plugs into your Mac.
Sure.
Every time they change your configuration, because you don't get, PC, you can get any customization you want. And so for them, it made sense to go down, but they didn't realize us users didn't want to have to deal with the PC side. So they relented very quickly. But by then, I mean, I don't know how true it is, and I don't have firsthand knowledge, but the rumor is when they did that, Steve Jobs' famous quote was, "I'm going to drive a truck through their business model." And all of a sudden, this Avid system that cost $150,000, $200,000 was competing with the system you'd buy a Mac and you'd buy a $1,000 piece of software, and it could do the same things.
Right.
So Avid had to drop their price significantly.
Well, Avid didn't want to get involved with the DV either. That was below them for what I think, if I recall correctly at the time. No, we're not going to get involved. That's consumer stuff.
Yeah.
But that was one of the things that drove Final Cut Pro and the Mac sales with FireWire. Absolutely.
Yep. Yeah, FireWire was great when it came out. The stuff I could do on my home system then. And the Avid version was, I forget what they called it. I had a version of Media Composer at home that was stripped of a huge amount of features.
Yeah,
so,
I had that, yes.
It was awful. It's like, I don't want to work with this. So I didn't love Final Cut 1, but I was cutting projects on it. Because when I'd go to the office, I'd have a full-fledged Avid. At home, Final Cut does everything I need it to do. I don't love the interface, but I'll make it work.
Right.
Yeah, the Avid did not switch to home systems for a very long time. And I think they lost a lot of younger people with that. That's the younger kids were learning Premiere.
Yes, or Final Cut when it came out.
Yeah.
So what would be some of the things that you would port from Avid to Final Cut if you could? So project sharing, that would be the main thing?
Sharing is huge. I cannot underestimate it. It is so... I could not get a reality TV show to even consider switching over to Final Cut. No, even if they were my show and I was running it, right now with 5 or 6 or 10 editors, I'd have to go with Avid.
Sure.
I don't... And one of the comments I did get on the article was about it's the system designed... it's a sharing system for Final Cut that uses the cloud. That I think a public news organization in Europe, somewhere in the Netherlands perhaps, developed.
Okay.
Remember what it's called, but it is now available and you can share projects that way. But it needs to be built into the software. It needs to be intrinsic sharing between multiple editors. Dupe detection is small but important. You know, relinking to proxies. There's a lot of small things that I'd want, and that list is out there. You have your list that I was reading through yesterday. Some great ideas on there.
Yeah, well, I listen. I've had that list since Final Cut Pro version 5.
Right.
So I started at 5, but it only had 50 items, and it's just every issue. You know, every time it updates, I don't keep. I'm going to be updating because I'm redoing all my websites right now.
Okay.
So you talked about proxies. So yeah, the ability to relink proxies in Final Cut 10 would be a very, very welcome thing. And I'm not sure why you can't. You can relink your other media, but for some reason they stop short of relinking proxies. And proxies, especially when we're going to 6K and 8K. Come on. You know, when I shoot 4K. I've been shooting in 4K since the GH4 came out. And the proxy is 1080p. It's an HD size. So that's great. So when you get to 6K and 8K, the 8K is going to be a 4K file or a 2K file, whatever the heck it is. So the ability to use those is fantastic, but you have to be able to manage those, the proxy relinking process, and of course.
And there's a workaround that's not hard to do, and it works great because this film I just cut, the DIT was making proxies on set, and I'd get the drive and have to transfer it to my drive. And I found a thing online, I think it may have been Steve Martin again, explaining some bizarre workaround where you move the folders in and you then tell Final Cut to delete the proxy media that didn't exist and then to create it, but then it just sees they're already in the folder. I mean, it's convoluted, but it worked.
Right. So, you have to just point Final Cut to the new proxy folder, and if everything's the same, it won't recreate them. It'll just relink. But
that tells me that it can relink.
Right. Of course.
Tell it to do it. It can't be that hard.
Well, you can relink regular media. What's the difference? I mean, what's the difference? Just
let me set proxy sizes. Let me make them smaller if I want to.
You're talking about my list now. No, absolutely.
There you go.
Proxy size in data size and data rate and the resolution. I mean, I don't need a 1080p proxy when I'm shooting 4K. Give me I'm going to do a 720. I don't need a 1080 for proxy. The other thing,
Go ahead.
Well, the other thing is I'd like to have the ability to use proxy and full res media in the same timeline. Not one or the other.
Yeah.
Not one or the other. So I like to have them both, and just, you know, it did one of the features that I requested was to warn you if you're exporting a proxy timeline. They added that a couple of times ago, because before that you could export and you're using proxy, and that's what the quality that you got was a proxy quality.
Now the good news is switching between proxy and full res when it works so well.
Yes, it's like seamless.
It was unreal. This project that I cut last year, the Australian one, was shot in 7K, and my iMac's 5 years old. It's not playing 7K video.
Right.
So I made proxies, and just that drop in that timeline data, the menu option, and switching back and forth constantly, and never had an issue with it. So that's a thing of beauty. They did that well.
Absolutely a thing of beauty, but I want them to bring the proxy icon down to the timeline rather than going up to the view menu, doing a scroll down and clicking. Just a little proxy on the timeline, little button.
Then you mentioned preferences that are more adjustable, so you could put more buttons in there.
Yeah.
I mean, Premiere is really, really adjustable any way you want it. You know, the one thing I wish they'd steal from Premiere is the tilde key. You hit that tilde key over any window that you're in, and it goes full screen instantly. And you hit the tilde key again, it goes away. It is one of the coolest features Premiere has, and I wish everyone would, they've taken enough from other systems, time to steal back.
Well,
that's the
plus,
one thing I would take from Premiere.
I remember a time when Final Cut didn't have JKL, transportation. I think they got it from Avid, I guess.
Yeah. I remember Avid, the early days, the space bar was the stop button. It was not the play button. Now it does both.
Yeah, right.
That's a customization you just had to do on your end because it wasn't there.
Yeah.
Those are all little things that I'd love to see come to Final Cut. But for me, sharing, if they add that one thing, and I've said this before also, I'm going to say it again, stop calling sequences projects. You can't.
Wait a minute.
Oh,
Sean Lander's paying you to say this, right?
No, this was mine.
Okay.
Because you can call it, I don't care if you call it the who's or what's it. I don't care what you call it. You can't use the word project. If I'm building a car, I can't arbitrarily say this is no longer an axle, it's a steering wheel.
Right.
You can call it the wheel stick, but you can't call it the steering wheel. That term already exists somewhere else. So I hired a new DIT who learned Final Cut for this last film. And she did an amazing job. And I taught her how to use shot notes and sync and link. I mean, she did amazing work. But using the word project versus library, I don't care you call it a library instead of a project. But sequence, but project is such a specific term in the entire industry that you can't just say, I'm not going to call it, you can go from bin to event, but you can't say, I'm not going to call it a bin, I'm going to call it an audio mixer. Audio mixers are different. It means something already. Project means something specifically. And as we're trying to bring in more editors to come into Final Cut, and every time you use the word project, you have to say, oh, wait, I mean this kind of project, not that kind. This is the one place I wish Apple would say, you're right, we screwed up. We're just going to call it a sequence. Problems, keep it a library. Keep the big thing a library instead of a project. I don't care. But the sequence has to be a sequence, or call it the storyline instead of the timeline, whatever. You can't use the word project.
No, I agree. Yeah.
It's so frustrating. It causes unnecessary communication errors with other people in our industry all along, through online, from pre-production through post-production, at every stage of the way.
Right. So how important do you think Hollywood is to Final Cut Pro, Apple and Final Cut Pro? Considering the fact that they probably have 4 million plus seats at this point, do you think that it was ever a target? I know Steve Jobs did like it when there was an Oscar or whatever, and Final Cut was used for it. I know he enjoyed that prestige, but nowadays, how important do you think Hollywood is to Final Cut or the Apple team?
A big industry. There's money to be made in it. I don't know if it's important to Apple, but I'd like it to be important. When I spoke with Apple marketing about the film I cut, it's a small indie horror film with 500 visual effects, which is very small in terms of Fast and Furious. But for an independent film, that's a lot. And, we didn't do the effects in-house. We sent them out. But to manage it all with one editor on Final Cut,
right,
it was really awesome. So they seemed excited about it. I don't know if it's important to their business model, but why, if you're making this great product, why not go after the peak of the industry? Why not compete in that space when you have a product that easily can compete there with one feature missing?
Well, the project sharing, or
that's it. That's the one feature that would change everything in Hollywood. I mean, the studios are not going to jump on this right away.
Right.
Very slow to move. Laura talked about in the interview. They like Avid. They know the workflow. They know the process.
Right.
But they change slowly. There are films being cut in Premiere.
Sure.
And there are indie films with one editor, maybe two, being cut in Final Cut. But that can make more inroads. I don't know if it's important to Apple, but it's important to me.
Right. It's important to a lot of the customers. It absolutely is. So when you another segment you're talking about was compound clips in your article. Mm-hmm. Wouldn't you like the compound clip to open up in place in Final Cut instead of going to another timeline?
It'd be great.
It's so aggravating. I was cutting a promo this week, and I took all the audio and put it inside a compound clip because I didn't want it to get out of sync and everything, and it's on different different layers, different storylines. And then I go to edit, and I'm taken out of my timeline into a compound clip with just audio that has no relation whatsoever to the picture at that point. I can't see the picture. Rather than just click on it, it opens up, expands in the same timeline so I can do my edits and see my picture at the same time.
100%. All I have to do, what I do in those cases is I break it apart. And at the end, I create a new compound clip. It's a pain. So that's on my really important, but not so important that I can't, use it list. There's a lot of things like that I really want added. But none of them will stop me from using the system. No,
I agree. There's plenty of things I'd like to see in Final Cut, but where it catches me every time is the live skimmer, the live film strips in the browser, the keywording, the favoriting. It's so much. You really miss that when you go to another NLE.
Outweigh the cons in big ways, without a doubt.
Yeah. So have you used Resolve at all? The editor, NLE?
Not as an editor. I've used it for and I don't do the finishing work, but I've used it to send stuff from Final Cut to Resolve for finishing. I've opened up, I found some bugs in Final Cut exporting, what are they called? DPX files, I think they are.
Okay.
So we had to use Resolve to do that, and I learned how to do it that way, and it worked great. I've played around with it at NAB where they have the editing system up there, and I've gone in and messed with it. And there's a lot I like about it. I really like how well the two systems talk to each other, because just about everything I finish these days, all the color correcting is done through Resolve, all of it. So I know when I send from Final Cut to Resolve, there'll be a little conforming needed, but it's going to come through really nicely. So I don't know enough about Resolve to speak about it in depth, but I have played with it.
Right. I was using it last year. I started using 15 because it was getting close to being released. Mm-hmm. And then they released 16 in beta. It's like, well, wait, and I got to wait another year before it gets stable. That's, but I like what they're doing. I'm not so sure if having the full audio suite that they have in Resolve is a good idea. I like Logic separate from Final Cut myself.
Yeah, I don't do a lot of, there's another cat saying hi. I don't do a lot of editing of audio work at that end. I do the basic editing in the system and send it out to Mix House. So I don't know Logic very well. I don't know Pro Tools well. Most of the stuff I do goes to Pro Tools, but I have sent stuff that was mixed in Resolve. In what do they call?
Fairlight.
Fairlight. Yeah, that's it. So I have done stuff that works in there, and the transfer seemed to work fine. As long as I can transfer to them, I'm happy.
So one of the things, segment 5 in your article, staying in sync.
Yes.
Now I have one comment about that, though.
Sure.
Sometimes I want to take the audio and video out of sync, or I want to correct it because, like, sometimes these live streams, the Google, whatever, the internet makes things out of sync.
Yes.
And right now in Final Cut, I have to separate the audio from the video.
Not all, because I've done it where I get some clips where you have your clap or your slip, where it's just out of sync by a few frames. And I like that you can double click, go into the audio, shift it by a few frames, even if it's, the part that you're not using will be grayed out and have the hash marks on it. You just go there, you line up the clapper audio, the clapper video, you back out of the clip, and it's now fixed in your timeline. That's pretty cool.
Why not do it in the timeline itself? Why do you have to see? I don't like jumping to other timelines in Final Cut. I don't like that. So in other words, I'd like to do that. Just right click on it. Remember Final Cut Pro 7, you could get the audio and video and put them in sync or out of sync, and the little flags would come up in the timeline where it is, not jumping to another, not what they call the open clip in its own timeline. No, I want to do it in the main timeline.
Yep.
I don't want to be jumping somewhere else. This gets very
how many frames you're out of sync as well.
Yes.
So you know how. Yeah.
Little flags.
Yeah.
But right now, you can go into the clip, absolutely timeline. But I just a lot of times will just export just separate the audio from the video and then just adjust the audio separately, and it's a pain.
And I'm constantly taking room tone from this part of have a long scene with dialogue.
Sure.
This part's quiet. I need this room tone here. I don't want to go back to the clip because I'm lazy, so I do my range select, copy, paste, and then I bring the video with it. Because you can't, if you're synced up, you can't just select the audio. So I have to paste it, and I have to break it apart, which Sean always tells me not to do, but I do it anyway.
Right.
Delete the video. Now I've got this nice clean room tone that I can move around.
Right.
There could be more efficient ways there are some things that are more efficient in other systems.
Right, of course. That's the whole issue. People, if they get emotional and this is this and this is that, no. All three of the major LLEs, and even like Resolve is now the fourth one, and then there's Hit Film, which is another one that's really big. It's got a lot of users. Okay. Yeah, it's another one that I interviewed them at NAB last year. I was interested because they have a big all-in-one compositing and video editing and stuff. So there's many of them out there. So they all have their strengths. But I mean, we're spoiled from Final Cut. The features that it has, the live skimming for me, and the keywording and all that, it makes it hard to do that no matter what the shortcomings are, it makes it hard to do that, elsewhere. Dragging a clip around the timeline with everything all attached to it is just fantastic.
It's amazing.
It's just fantastic.
It's a pain in the butt.
You got to select all the different things, and
if they don't all line up at the same point, if you've got overlap, and I've learned my shortcut. I'm one of the few people who uses the clipboard monitor in Avid. I don't see it used a lot, where you can copy into the clipboard monitor and paste it elsewhere and control the track direction. But, it's a lot of work for a very simple fix in Final Cut. And by the way, with all the systems out there, I love competition. I like that there's multiple NLEs fighting for markets. For us, it's good for the end users.
No, I would hate it if everybody used Final Cut.
Yeah.
That would be terrible. That would be absolutely terrible. I don't want everybody to have the advantages of Final Cut.
And when everyone used Avid, they stopped innovating.
Right.
Keep the competition, force innovation. Absolutely.
No, absolutely. Now, Resolve is coming up strong as far as that goes. As far as NLEs, their NLEs get coming up pretty good, even though they borrow from the other NLEs different things. A lot of it looks like Final Cut 7 and 10 smashed together sometimes.
Yes. Yeah. When I talked to them at NAB and I was asking about the new edit features, they were very adamant that it was for rough cutting, for first passes, and that for detailed editing you have to go into the normal edit system. So a lot of those features are not there. Maybe they'll change that over time, and I don't know why they're adamant about that, but they were pretty clear. And when I kept asking them about showing the IXML audio data, the names of the microphones in the clip, they didn't quite get it. They go, well, we show it in the Fairlight. It doesn't matter. I want to see it in the clip while I'm editing. The only system I know that does that right now is Final Cut, where I'm looking at the clip and I can turn on this character, this character, this character, or and see their names and know which microphones I'm hearing. Can't do that in Premiere and Avid. You're listening to one edit. You can label the track names. But whatever you label the track, you can put a different clip on it. It doesn't matter. So I like having the clip telling me exactly what audio channels are turned on and naming them the way I want them named.
Right.
That's a big plus.
Have you lost any of your Avid friends in Hollywood because you wrote the article?
I don't think so. I mean, some of them think I'm crazy, but if I get to talk to them for 5-10 minutes, I've been telling people about this since I switched 3 years ago. And we have friends who cut big movies and TV shows and everything. I've talked to them, and they'll be dismissive at first. And I tell the truth. I had the exact same reaction. I laughed when Final Cut 10 launched. I'm like, what a joke. I mean, I was wrong, but I laughed. And it was Michael Matsdorf who talked me into using it. And for 2 weeks, I'd call him every day yelling at him. I was cutting the short film, like, what'd you do to me? I was so angry. And he said, it's going to take 2 weeks, give it time. And then it clicked. Yeah. And I tell everybody that. But when you try to describe a magnetic timeline with just words or describe a trackless editing system, they don't get it. I mean, you can get close, but not there. So this video was my attempt to show them. And then it became an article that if I'm going to show my friends, I can show everybody at the same time and let people make up their own minds. But now I've shown these editors, here's what I'm talking about, and they love it. Doesn't mean they're going to switch, but they get it at least.
Right. Exactly. So that's, I don't mind talking about the different NLEs and stuff, but if you get into ridiculous, like I said, my NLE can beat up your NLE. I'm not interested in that.
I've had no fights about it. No, nobody really cares that much. They're curious, they learn. And 3 years ago, they rolled their eyes, and now they're like, I've been hearing that a lot lately. So somehow Final Cut's making that inroads where it went from being a pariah to, I don't know how to use it. I don't know anything about it, but I've been hearing it's really good.
Yes.
So I like that shift of mentality has come through.
Absolutely. So what other features, what other items on your article you want to bring out? So the highlights. I mean, staying in sync. We covered that. The compound clips. We covered that a little bit. Audio components. Now, do you like the audio components in Final Cut, or do you think it could be done better?
Well, it could definitely be done better. I love 90% of it.
Okay.
I love a lot of it, not all of it. When you have the inspector menu, you can turn tracks on and off. Right. I wish I could adjust the volume individually in there. I don't know why I have to actually expand the clip and do it in the clip. So being able to just grab one and just adjust a small thing there. A mixing tool for rolls that you don't have to compound. Everyone's talked about that would be very helpful. I'm about to have to send this film out to Audio House, to the composer with
Sure.
with dialogue on one track and music and effects on another. It's not hard. I got to make compound clips and mix them that way. But it'd be nice to just say, put all dialogue here, all music
Yep.
and effects there.
Yep.
It could be improved, but as a general rule, not having 40 tracks of audio it's gorgeous. You just look at it, everything's right there, and it's so easy. And I'm dropping in clips left and right, and I don't have to worry about the sync. You have to see where the clips are connected. If you have
Sure.
pre-lap audio and you connect to the pre-lap part instead of the main part,
Right.
you can throw yourself off, but you have to pay attention to this now. You can't assume the software is doing it all. But as long as you're watching what you're doing, it's just easy to move scenes around.
Yeah, it's very easy in 10. Absolutely.
Yeah. I love subclipping. In Avid, it's something I do. Take a big chunk, subclip it, move it into a bin, which you can do as a compound clip. But sometimes I think subclipping might be a little easier. I don't know if you know what I'm talking about with subclipping specifically.
Well, I knew it in Final Cut Pro 7.
Okay, taking a big chunk of the timeline and literally just dragging an icon into your bin, and that part is now a separate sequence in your bin.
I see.
Compound, but one less step. Just a little bit, anything that's more efficient and quicker,
Sure.
I love doing. So now I do a compound clip. A lot of times where I'll use that is I'll copy a section and paste it 3 or 4 times if I want to work on a scene and try 3 or 4 different ways.
Right.
So compound clips are a great way for that. And much of this is my learning how to think in Final Cut style. I'm not, been using it 3 years, but I'm not fully there. I'm still learning. Oh, you know what? There's a better way to do this.
Right.
I'm just starting to put music on its own storyline or finish the edit and compound that at the end. So I have what looks like an unedited music track, but I can go in and change it. Although there's no video reference if you do that, as you said.
Right.
So it's a process. Takes years to think in a different NLE to really understand it well. You're not going to do it on day one.
Right. Well, that's one of the things that you have to realize. In your article, you said you got to give yourself 2 weeks or don't even bother. If
Yes.
you're not going to give yourself 2 weeks, then you're just wasting your time. You're going to be frustrated.
That's the basics. That's not to get in depth. That
No,
is
of
the
course.
basic flow. Yeah.
Of course.
Yeah. In depth, any new project that I'm working on, I try to learn one new little tip. And that for years. What's one shortcut that I can make a keystroke? You talked about zooming in and out of the timeline in one of your podcasts.
Right.
I make that the plus and minus key.
Right.
So my
Single
input number-
keys.
yeah.
Yes.
I lose the shift. I lose control.
Right.
Every project I do, a new show, new film, whatever, I try to come up with one new tip. This last one was raising and lowering the volume level on a clip with a keyboard.
Right.
Just memorizing. It's not hard, but I try to memorize 1 or 2 at a time and use them. Because if you memorize it all at once, you'll forget about it.
No, absolutely. That's exactly what I do. I just pay attention to what I'm doing the most.
Yeah.
And then during the day, and then I take my top 10 and make them single keyboard shortcuts rather than the complex ones.
Yep.
Or even 2. I mean, Apple Plus and Apple Minus, I always have to look at the keyboard for that. I can't do it from muscle memory because they're too far apart.
Yep.
So I made mine right next to JK&L. I have the semicolon and the apostrophe because I don't use those for anything else at this point. So I keep my hands on JK&L.
Right. Yeah. And I don't do that. My hand's on the left side of the keyboard usually.
Okay.
But anything that I implement here, I'll implement in the other systems. So now on Avid, it used to be for my zoom in and out was command right bracket and left bracket. Now it's the plus and minus key. It's better.
Yeah, much better. Makes more sense. I mean, that's, and then you can always, in Final Cut, at least in Final Cut, you can't create a custom keyboard until you save the default one.
Yes. So you always have the backup you can go to.
Always have the backup because people say, what if I'm teaching a class? Well, then, just load the default one. It takes you a couple seconds.
Yeah, easy.
And I keep mine in Dropbox so I can access them just about anywhere.
Yep.
Have we covered everything?
I believe so.
Have you? I hope I see you at the summit this year. That's what I'd be.
I hope so. If I go, I will let you know and absolutely say hi.
Absolutely. I
Great.
think we've solved all the problems. There's no more hard feelings between Final Cut and Avid and Premiere, right? All the editors are nice and harmonious, and this.
Certainly at the high end level, people have their favorite systems, but nobody's angry if you're using a different one. They just may not take the job if they don't want to use whatever system you're working on.
That would be nice to be able to do that.
Yeah, sometimes if you're lucky, if you get to the point in your career where you can turn gigs down, more power to you.
That is exactly correct. I mean, when I got my job at the archives, it was Avid. I didn't know that going in.
Right.
But when I got down to the interview, I said, it's not a problem. I don't mind learning a new NLE on the job.
My first premiere job, I did what you did. I told him, I mean, he's a friend of mine, I'm working from home. And I said, yeah, I know how to use it. I'd never used it in my life. By the end of the first day, I had it, I had the basics. I could work in it.
Right.
And a lot of, how do I do this? Before I call anybody, I'll Google it. I mean, you got to have your Google foo down.
Absolutely.
There's YouTube tutorials, and you have to find the tutorials that get to the point quickly.
Yes. Yeah. That's the other thing. Tutorials that are like 30 minutes long, you don't know where anything is. But it's like, before I did editing, I was a carpenter for years and years and years. And whether I used a DeWalt compound slider saw or a big Hitachi 15-inch to cut I still know how to cut them. I know how to cut crown. You cut crown upside down and backwards. I know the technique. I just got to adjust a little bit depending on the saw I'm using, but it doesn't take away from the fact that I know I have the knowledge on how to do the cutting.
Yeah.
Cutting, yeah.
Editing is two skills, creative and technical.
Right.
The creative sticks with you. The technical, you learn some new buttons. So what?
Yeah.
It's not that hard, but the creative is what you're hired for.
That's exactly correct. And we are the storytellers.
Yeah.
People have put together, films, they've acquired footage, but it doesn't do anything until the editor puts it together.
Yeah.
And boy, he can change or she can change the whole meaning of your story if you know.
Big time. And that's the fun of it is, the third time a film's written, the first time you write it, the second time when you shoot it, the third time when you edit it. Reality TV is built in holy cow, it's built in the editor. And the changes you can make, the story power you have in there to really tell a compelling story. If not my favorite to watch, but I loved working in it because it's so challenging and you have so much storytelling ability in the edit room.
Absolutely. So, Michael, you have anything you want to plug? I'm going to plug your article again.
Plug the article. I got a couple of films coming out, but they're not out yet. So
you can't talk about them?
I can mention they're on IMDb. Look for The Dust Walker, which is a really cool sci-fi horror film out of Australia.
Okay.
And I'm currently cutting Another Girl, which is the kind of cousin sequel to a cool cult indie film called Ask Me Anything. Came out about 4 or 5 years ago.
Okay. Now,
go ahead.
Why are you cutting in Australia?
That's a long story. That is such a long story. The short version being it was an Australian film.
Okay.
That some of the financing came from London. The woman who secured the financing in London, her business partner who was living out there, they worked together. He was an American. And she wanted him to edit it because he's a great editor. He didn't want it. I was supposed to edit his previous film and it didn't happen. He's a good friend of mine. And he said, no, I'm not doing it. My buddy Mike's doing it. And this went on, and somehow the footage ended up in my hands, and we cut the film.
There you go.
I did most of it with the internet. I did most of it in LA, and then I flew out to Melbourne to work with the writer-director for about a month. We had a great time. We got the polish on, and the rest I finished here from Los Angeles. Was able to send, all the footage to the effects houses in Australia. Everything else was done in Australia, so I was able to send everything to them there. But it was one of those weird, convoluted stories that it ended up in my lap just from, being friends with this guy for years. And we'd been working together for years. And I was not about to turn down a really cool gig out of Australia.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, it was great. And that's where I met Sean and now a bunch of the Final Cut guys that Sean organized. We all met up for lunch at a beer garden. It was great.
That's fantastic. Absolutely. Because we just had 2 sessions with the Final Cut Pro Aussies. It was too many to put in one. So I had to do 2.
They're good guys. I got along great with them. So
every one of them. Well, I sure hope I see you at the summit this year. That'd be great. If not, just get a personal invitation to your friend Tim Cook, and he'll get you at least into the Apple presentation.
Come on, give me a hookup. No.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm planning on being there, and nothing definite yet, but I'm going to try my best.
Sounds good, Michael. I sure appreciate it.
Thanks, Richard.
And we'll talk again. Thank you.
Sounds good. Bye.
Bye.